Hopefully you've watched the other videos concerning Java and using NetBeans, and that has all been in a console-based environment. So now let's move into the GUI, or the Graphical User Interface environment. In order to create a Graphical User Interface project in NetBeans, we'll click on File, New Project, and click on Next, and we'll give it a name. I'll call it First GUI Greg, since one already exists. And then the most important thing you need to do is uncheck the box that says Create Main Class. The reason being is if we leave that checked, NetBeans will go ahead and create the class for us, and it's not going to call our form or our JFrame, and we would have to go manually do that. So instead, we'll just go ahead and uncheck that, and then later on, NetBeans will ask us who do we want to be the main class. Click Finish, and it creates our project, but if you notice, there are no source code files, and so we're going to right mouse click on our package and add a new JFrame form. Now be careful. You might see JPanel form in this position depending on which operating system you're using, but make sure it says JFrame form, not JPanel. Give the JFrame a name. I like to call mine FRM and then whatever. This will be my first window that pops up, so I'm going to call it FRM main. I'll click Finish, and then it will create my form. This is actually an object. This object has properties, and I can tell they have properties because over here there's a properties window. And for this object, the properties that it lists are things like the background, the cursor, what font do you want to use, foreground, what's the name of the frame. The frame is going to act as a container that I can drop other objects on. If you don't see your properties window, click on Window, IDE Tools, and Properties, and that will display that properties window. The properties window allows you to actually change attributes for objects that you're going to work with. This will be quite handy. There's going to be multiple ways you can change it, but properties, using the properties window is probably one of the easiest ways to do it. Now that we have a frame on there, one of the first things I need you to do is right mouse click on the frame and choose a layout. By default, the layout here is a free design. Even though it says border layout is default, it's saying that the free design is selected. I want to choose absolute layout. Now these different layouts we're not going to cover in the class right now, but just let me give you a brief overview. What they're doing is they're saying if you choose a layout, then the designer will try to partition areas of the frame associated with that layout. For instance, the border layout, if I chose that, I'll go ahead and show you. If I chose that, then up here you're going to have you'd have an area for the top, an area for the bottom, an area for the left, an area for the right, and then an area for the center. And as you resize your window, like when you run it and you resize it, or if you put it on a system with different dimensions on your screen, the system tries to readjust all the components inside of it. For now, we want you to choose Set Layout, Absolute Layout. And that means that where you drop something, that's where it stays. If you maximize your window, it still stays in that position. So make sure you've changed the layout by right mouse clicking, choosing Set Layout, Absolute Layout. Next thing I want to do, I want to put panels on this frame because a panel is also a container and will hold things, sort of like the little Tupperware container you put your lunch in. Well, and as you move your Tupperware container, the lunch goes with it. So we're going to put a panel on that form, meaning that I can drop it on there, and when I put other objects in the panel, if I move the panel, the objects will go with it. It's a nice way to organize your form. So simply drag and drop a panel on that form, and you can resize it. And notice that when you click over in your when you look over in your properties window, it now says JPanel, and that JPanel has properties, it has attributes, things you could change. For instance, I could say I want a border around this panel by clicking the border attribute and clicking the ellipsis, the three dots, and we could say we want it to be a line border, and you can change attributes about that line border, or it could be a bevel border. In this case, let's just go ahead and leave it a line border, and we'll leave the thickness of 1, and we want it to be rounded corners, and we'll leave the color of the border to be black. I'll click OK, and then notice it changes that border. Another thing you could do is maybe we want the background to be a different color. You can click on the ellipsis and choose a color. Maybe we want the background to be sort of a soft blue. We'll click on OK, and now we have a blue background. So what you're doing really is you're just dropping objects into your GUI frame and then just changing attributes of it. So far, I haven't changed any source code manually. Behind the scenes, there's something happened. I'll show you that a little bit later. Next thing I want to do is I want to drop a button on that form, and I'm going to put it on the panel. Notice as I drop the panel on that, or the button on that panel, that you have some weird lines show up. That's because I've never changed the layout for the panel. So one other thing I'd like you to do is click on the panel object. You can tell the panel object is selected by clicking on it and looking at it in your properties window, and it says JPanel1. Right mouse click on the panel, choose layout to be absolute layout, just like we did for the frame. Now let's click once again on our button, and here's the object, and that button has different attributes like text. I could come in and change the text by typing in the word close. Now another way I could have changed that is simply right mouse click on the object and choose edit text, and that would allow you to change it also. One thing I do like to do with all my objects is right mouse click on that button and choose change variable name. It's wise to give your objects variable names so that when you use them later on in your code, you can easily remember what they are. For buttons, I like to use the prefix of btn, and then I'll call this close. btn close. Click OK. So that's now the name of that object, that button. Once again, it's got attributes that you can change and work with. Another thing a button can do is it can respond to events, meaning if someone does something to it, you can say, hey, go do this source code. And we can either see the events in your properties window, here's all the events you have, or another way you can get to the events is by right mouse clicking on the object, choosing event, and in this case I want to say if they ever click on it, so I'll go to mouse clicked. This now sends you to your source code editor that says, hey, if you ever click on this button, what do you want it to do? And I'm going to type in that I want it to do a system.exit with the parameter of 0, meaning exit the application, and we're going to return back the value of 0 to whoever started this application. Somebody might care about that, somebody might not, but a value of 0 says, hey, it's exiting just fine. If you want to get back to your design window, notice you have these buttons right here, design and source. They allow you to toggle back and forth. Now that I have a panel and a button and source code is associated with that button, that if you ever click on it, you do a system.exit, let's go ahead and run our program. So NetBeans says, hey, you don't have a main class. Who do you want to be the main class? Well, I've only got one form, and that is the form I want to be my main class. So I'll leave it selected, click OK, and here's my program now running. Notice how nice it is. I can click on that button and it closes the application. You now have a NetBeans GUI application that you can work with.